Me now is Dr. Jonathan Schroden. He's the director of the Countering Threats and Challenges program at the think tank CNA, a non-profit research and analysis organisation based in Arlington, Virginia. Dr. Schroden, thank you very much for being with us. In these closing moments, what will the military priorities be?
Well, the priority first and foremost for the U.S. military will be the safety of its own forces, U.S. service members, as well as any civilians that may be on the last few flights to depart the airport. That will undoubtedly be the priority. It's been President Biden's priority throughout the withdrawal. He made it clear that that was the number one thing he was concerned about, was the safety of U.S. service members. And so I would expect that to remain the priority until all of those service members are on airplanes departing the airport.
Talk us through how the practicalities of how that works, getting those last few people on the planes and in the skies.
Yeah, so there's a couple of, as I think about it, there's a couple of different ways that it could probably go down. The first would be if the U.S. decides that it needs to unilaterally collapse the security perimeter and get out. Most likely what you would see is, if you were inside the airport and able to see it, you would start to see a thinning of the forces that are there. So they would first load up all of the support forces, right? Logisticians, communicators, those types of folks, and get them out. And then, behind them, they would start to thin out the infantry, the rifle holders that are standing guard around the perimeter. They would start to thin out the perimeter, get as many of those folks out as they could. And then you would see a very rapid collapse of the perimeter itself, while those last remaining individuals, made a dash for the plane and very quickly got out. That's one way they could do it. A second way that they could do it is to do a coordinated handoff with the Taliban. And as odd as that sounds, the U.S. has clearly been coordinating security around the airport with the Taliban, sharing intelligence with them. Just today, a two-star general on the United States Joint Staff made a comment about how the communications with the Taliban have been improving by the day over the last 2 weeks. And so it is at least plausible that the U.S. could decide to undertake an orderly handoff to the Taliban of security at the airport in an attempt to try and not have the types of chaotic scenes that we saw early on in this evacuation.
When the US vacated some of its other military bases earlier on this year, it was just personnel and they left a lot of the machinery and equipment behind. Do we know whether that will be the case in Kabul as well, whether it's just a matter of getting the people out or whether they'll be taking kit with them?
I think at this point, it'll be mostly the people, if not entirely people. I'm not aware of them having brought a whole lot of gear along with them. Presumably they would have, withdrawn most of that gear already, so that the last few flights out, really there's only people to be left. The things they would leave behind would likely be pallets of water, food, right? Those types of extraneous things that they would have brought in to support themselves, that there's no real purpose in taking back out.
You mentioned security earlier on, a big concern, obviously, especially in light of Thursday's attack. How risky are these last few moments? Extremely
risky. There is no military operation more difficult than withdrawing under fire or withdrawing under threat. And this is an extremely, risky situation where the U.S. military is going to have to do exactly that. And not only withdrawing under threat of, attack from the likes of ISIS, et cetera, but withdrawing under that type of threat with many, many civilians around as well. That's an incredibly messy and potentially chaotic situation that's going to have to be handled very, very delicately and extraordinarily well for it to not look like the type of scenes that we saw at the outset of this evacuation.
Okay, Dr. Jonathan Schroden from the think tank CNA, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.